welcome back to the channel. So today what we're going to be working on is I have my 223556 die, or I'm sorry, tool head sitting here on my Dillon XL750, and it's completely blank. One of my previous videos you saw we were doing some 223 on the BL550, which is pretty awesome. But I want to get this tool head set back up and put on my rack. On my rack behind me here, this is the inline fabrication rail system that they have. Go check those out. But I like to keep all of my go-to recipes set up on its own tool head, on its stand, and so I can just plug it in real easy when I'm wanting to change over. So what I've got to do here now is I've got to get my dies set back up in this tool head. So we're going to go through what dies I'm using and how I like to run my tool head when I'm doing some high volume stuff, or I want a quick change in and out very easily. So just a quick note here, this tool head is going to be set up using already fully processed brass that I've already full length sized, I've already trimmed, I've already done the either chamfer or swaging operation. So basically this is just going to set up so we can load those rounds, fill the powder, put the primer, set the bullet, and go ahead and do the crimp. So let's go ahead and get this thing set up. So the first die I want to talk about here is the Lyman M die. I'm going to be using this into station 1. And the reason I'm using this die is we are using mixed head stamp brass. They're all trimmed the same length. They've all been sized with the same sizing die. So we know we have the outside of the case completely dimensionally the same from each piece regardless of the head stamp. What we don't know is the wall thickness of the brass. That can vary from different manufacturers. So what I want to do with the M die is it's basically an ID mandrel. It's going to slide into the ID and it's going to upsize that ID the same on every case regardless of what head stamp it is, what wall thickness it is, so we get a consistent neck tension on all of our bullets. So to set this dies up, pretty simple. We're just going to go ahead and thread it into station 1. Now this pin is adjustable. You can loosen this lock nut here and run it up and down. So we're going to go ahead and get that loose, and then we'll run it down into the shell holder. And then what we'll do next is we'll put a piece of brass in station 1, and we'll adjust this ID mandrel right here until we get the, what this will also do is put a slight pre-flare onto the brass. So we'll make that adjustment so that the bullet basically sits nice and tight there on the top of the case. So let's get that loosened up. We'll get this ran down, and then we'll get it set up. All right, so I went ahead and run the die down as far as I could. Now, normally on some presses, you'll be able to, bottom this out on the shell plate. With this particular press and this die, you won't be able to go all the way down and kiss the shell plate, but I'm gonna run it as far down as I can. And I also wanna make sure that I still have full thread engagement in my lock nut. So the first thing that we're gonna do to set our ID mandrel, and basically, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out here and show you guys what it's actually doing. Maybe. Alrighty. So you can see the ID mandrel is pretty simple. It's just going to slide into the ID again, make it very consistent. And then if you look here on the die, you can see there's a slight step there. So I want to catch that die and get, catch that mandrel and then get the upsize just a little bit so that my bullet will actually sit inside the case and then stay upright. And this works really well if you guys are using bullet feeders and things like that. Over on my RL1100, where I do have a bullet feeder set up, I use an ID mandrel die just so I can get that bullet to just sit nice and flush in there, and it rolls through and transfers from station to station. So this is going to be the tricky part. We're going to go ahead and raise the case up into the die, get it inserted into the mandrel, and then when we're going to back it off, we're not going to let it index because we're going to have to make several adjustments. So as I ran the brass up into the die, I couldn't feel any engagement at all with the ID mandrel. So there I felt some pretty good engagement. I'm going to double check, make sure my bullet will sit in there, and it'll kind of like snap into there. So that actually feels pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and leave that as is. And as always, regardless if you're just setting a seating stem, a ID mandrel, I like to go ahead and make those final snug ups right there on with the die doing what it's intended to do. So I'm going to use my cheater, my old cheater pliers there, get that snugged up, and we're good. So this die here, which is our powder funnel die, it has our ID funnel inside for our powder through. That was already set up, so we're not going to have to mess with that. Station 3, if you are a fan of a powder cop, right here would be the one to do, or perhaps a bullet feeder. I never use these, so we're going to skip over to that, and then we're going to go ahead and get our bullet seated and get that die set up. All right, for our bullet seating, we're going to use, this is a Dillon, I don't even think these are carbide. No, they're not. This is just a Dillon steel set. I've yet to wear out a steel set of dies, guys, so some people get hung up on having carbide for 223 or rifle. I am still on these dies here, and I would say 20-ish thousand probably on this set of dies here, so, and they're not worn out yet. But anyways, I'm going to digress a little bit. So our bullet seating die, again, it's going to have an adjustable ID here, so we can finite adjust our bullet seating depth when we get there. So to set this die, we're going to put it in station 3. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my keeper pin there, and we're going to put a piece of brass up into the die. And you don't necessarily have to do that, but I just kind of like to have that die just kind of center itself up around the brass. So we're going to go ahead and bring this down and kiss the shell plate. And the reason I want to kiss the shell plate is you're always going to get a little bit of deflection down here. So when I'm doing my seating, I want to make sure that my shell plate is completely flush up against the shell plate holder here, so that I get minimal variation in my bullet seating depth. So once we get that, again, just kissing the shell plate, I'm going to go ahead and grab my die lock wrench and just go ahead and snug that one up. And we'll just give it a couple bumps there. And then we're going to back our seating stem out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just put one of the bullets in, and we'll start adjusting our seating depth. I'm going to go ahead and, I cannot remember for the life of me if I ran this case up into that ID mandrel or not, but we'll go ahead and get her done anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure my bullet sits on there nice and tall, and we're going to run it up and see how far we need to go. Now, I've ran these so many times, I can just look at these and see where the cantilever is and see where I want my seating depth to be. But to do this the right way, you'll go ahead, make small adjustments, checking them with calipers until you get the seating depth that you want. And then once you're finished, you'll go ahead and lock your lock ring down on your seating stem. So I went ahead and locked in our seating stem, and now I'm going to go ahead and check this with some calipers to make sure I am at the overall length that I want to be, and I am. So we're going to call this one good. So we have our M die set up, our powder funnel, which was already set up. So next thing we'll have to do is probably adjust that powder throw. We got our seating die set up. Now we're going to focus here on the crimp die in station 5. All right, we're going to move forward with our Dillon crimp die here. I still have the case here in station 4 that we're going to go ahead and index over to our last station. And with this die, the best advice I can give people on setting up a taper crimp is, it's a little bit different depending on, what cartridge that you're reloading for. But my technique is pretty much what I use on everything. Is it's all about feel for me and small adjustments. So what I'm going to do is I have the case up into the die right now with the shell plate, and I'm going to try to do this so you guys can watch what I'm going to do here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and take this drop tube out of the way. so I can get my hand in here and show you. But all I'm doing is I'm hand tightening the die down right now, and I'm feeling the case insert up into the die. And once I start to get some heavy resistance, like I am right now, it's tough to move. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and I'm gonna wiggle it until I can't turn it anymore. And what that's telling me is that I've centered the die up onto the case mouth, around the bullet, and I can't move it anymore. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna back that die, or I'm sorry, back the shell plate out just a little bit, and I'm gonna go a quarter turn. And that's it. Depending on how heavy you want, a quarter turn on this press, this particular die will yield me just a medium-ish crimp. But you know, on some guys won't even apply crimp, and that's fine. I like to apply crimp just so I know that my neck tension is perfect between case to case. And you know, depending on what bullet that you're using, you know, some have a deeper cantilever than others. These particular ones just have a slight indentation, kind of like a knurling around there. It's not very pronounced, so I don't want to go too heavy on my crimp, because if you go too heavy, you can buckle the shoulder, you can buckle the neck here, and you can actually loosen up your neck tension where the bullet will move around pretty easy. So for me, I know that's pretty good. In fact, I'll go ahead and just drop it out here, do a quick inspection, and that crimp looks good for my needs. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to double check it into a chamber gauge, and I've got everything nice and flush. So I'm going to go ahead and run this back up into the die, pull my keeper pin out, and we'll grab our die wrench. And on the Station 5, when you lock the die down, it's so much easier just to go ahead and pull that pin out of your tool head, and we'll call that good. So now the next thing I got to do is get my powder throw where I want it, get some primers in, and we're going to start running some and see what they look like. All right, let's go ahead and put some primers in here. And those of you think this looks like a crazy contraption right here, this is for the RF100 primer filler. It's an automatic primer filler. I've been using quite a bit here in the last year or so. Really digging that. Makes loading primers easy. Check out my other videos on this unit right here. I was kind of on the fence before, but now I'm definitely loving it. All right, we're gonna get our powder measure set up. I'm gonna go ahead and take our fail-safe rod, loosen up a little bit. I can't remember exactly what I was set up on before, but you know, depending on your height of your powder measure and your powder die, this is gonna change quite a bit. So you will have to make this adjustment every time you switch over. So to install this, again, we're going in this direction, making sure that we engage both levers there on our powder measure. And we'll go ahead, raise the shell plate up a little bit, push our white retaining clip in, and then we're gonna push the press forward, and right here on this spring, we're gonna tighten that up until between the springs, we get about a business card's width. So that looks pretty good, not too technical, but Dillon will even tell you it's a business card width. So we have our powder measure all set. So I'll get some powder in here. We'll get some primers put into the system, and we'll start running it and see what we come up with. I'm not gonna tell you what kind of powder we're using here, but it is a fine ball powder. I like using the fine ball powder sometimes. And what's nice about the Dillon hopper here, it's gonna hold a pound, which for most guys, that's gonna yield you roughly, depending on your charge weight, 250 rounds or so of 223. So I'm gonna go ahead and uniform my powder measure, and all I'm doing is giving it some taps here on the side. And as you can see, the volume, the powder starts to compress and it drops down. So we'll call that good. So let's go ahead and see what our base charge is and then make some adjustments to our powder measure from there. All right, we're gonna throw some charges. I need to go ahead and get my case feeder adapter hooked back up and my drop tube. I like to kind of simulate I'm running here as I do my adjustments to the powder measure, because you know this vibration that you find throughout the press will affect the powder measure a little bit. So I went ahead and set my primer. So let's go ahead and see what our first throw is. I suspect we're going to be in the ballpark, but it's a good idea to go ahead and drop several throws here. And I've already made a mess, but in any event, we'll go ahead and run the press around. I'm just going to take them out here in station 3. So what I'm doing is I'm dumping out the powder and then just reinserting it into station 2 every time, making sure that I'm going a full stroke down and forward. So I'm going to do roughly 5 throws or so. Dillon says 10, but I still think that's maybe overdoing it a little bit. I'm usually pretty good on 5, and we'll see what our first charge weight is here. I'm going to run it over on my Dillon determinator. And I must have been using a stick powder before. I'm about 4/10 too heavy from where I want to be with this particular powder. So to make an adjustment, this is one of those Armanoff dials. You know, the tick marks, has the tick marks on it. I know I need to go about 4/10, which is roughly about a half a turn or so. So I'm going to go ahead and do 5 more charges. And maybe for time, I will just do 3 here and see how close I am. And then I'll run it out off camera so I'm not boring you guys to death with this. Let's just see how close that was. Checking it on the scale now. All right. Well, that is right on the money. So we're going to go ahead. I will run some more charges just to confirm that we're being consistent, but then we'll get into running the press. All right, I have my powder charge set where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one out through the press, and then we'll just do a quick verification on our overall length. We'll double check our crimp again. You know, one question I get a lot about how often do I check my powder charges? And there's really no wrong answer here. Just check them. But my habit is I check them every time that I put primers in. I'll throw one and just check my charge weight. And, you know, I'm an analytical kind of guy, and I have not found much variation at all with the Dillon powder measure. So anyways, here is our completed round. We're going to double check it again in our case gauge. Looks good. Our crimp looks good. I'm going to double check our overall length to make sure it's on point with what we're looking for. And it looks good. So we are ready to fill up the case feeder and run some 223. And one thing I want to talk about is I really like the inline fabrication mount for the bullet tray because I can pretty much rest my hand here and I'm picking up bullets and putting them right into the case. I would almost challenge that I can do this faster, or I should say not faster, as fast as if I was using a bullet feeder. Now on the RL1100, that's a different case because where you do the bullet install, it's a little bit more cumbersome with your left hand. But the way this press is set up, I've never felt the need for a bullet feeder. And the other reason is this press here is what I do probably 90% of my reloading on if I'm doing some higher volume stuff, like for competition shooting and things like that. I can crank out a lot of rounds very fast on this press. And one thing I also mentioned too is I don't have any of the little widgets, the bearing kits, nothing, the aftermarket things that people think they need to add to their press. This press just runs, and the key is just taking care of it. Right now it's pretty dirty, but I keep it. I'm gonna turn this case feeder off. I keep it blowed out pretty good. I keep it greased up. I keep it clean, and it just runs without the need of any of those other little widgets and gizmos and things like that. So, hey guys, thanks for stopping in and checking out this video. Again, this was just a real quick setup here on my Toolhead for my 223 Remington. Just down and dirty, getting all the dies set up, going over what dies that I like to use. For this particular load, this is the one that I run the most of and shoot the most of. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to hit me up on my email, squatchreloading@gmail.com. You can still find me over on Facebook. We've kind of reduced our presence on social media a little bit, just a lot to keep up with. And with everything else going on, we just wanted to keep just kind of the main one there on Facebook. My email is always a good place to get a hold of me. Probably the quickest response you're going to get is send me an email. I try pretty hard to get back with everybody as much as possible as time allows. This is the busy season for me, but I appreciate you guys very much. The channel is still growing. I'm still very humbled with all the support that I get. The guys are still helping out over on Patreon, making donations and all that. That's awesome, and we appreciate it very much. And everything that we get through those outlets goes right back into the channel, bringing more content for you guys. So we got more reloading stuff coming up. We're going to try out some new hollow point bullets from Extreme. I haven't loaded much with those, so we're going to try those out on the RL1100. We've got more off-roading content coming with the Raptor, the X3, the DS250, the DVX300, Arctic Cat. So we've got that stuff coming up as well. But again, appreciate you all very much. If you would, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share these videos. But that's going to wrap this one up. Until next time, God bless.